Hey guys, this is our last week in the book of First Peter. We're going to be covering all of chapter 5 this week. My lesson is going to focus in on the first 5 verses, which are all about the elders and leadership of the church and how they're supposed to carry out that leadership. There's a ton of things to draw out from those few verses, and so I'm going to spend most of my time there. And then in discussion groups, you guys will hit on that really briefly, but then kind of press into the latter half of the chapter. So that's the plan for Sunday. You guys, discussion groups should be pretty straightforward this week, I think. You can open up with ask if anybody has thoughts or questions, concerns, anything they want clarification on, and then jump into your questions. The first one is referencing back to the lesson or kind of building off of that, and then the other ones are pushing into new territory. I'll give a few reasons at the end of my lesson why we did that, why we spent the whole time talking about elders and the leadership of the church and how they're supposed to lead to a group of young people and a group of young people who most of them will never be elders in a church. I'll give a little bit of a defense about why we spent so much time on that, but I think there are more reasons why it's important for us to actually dig in and focus on elders and how they're supposed to lead and how the authority of the church is supposed to work, even amongst people who aren't going to be elders, maybe potentially. And so you'll ask them and see if they can pull out more stuff about why is this important, why would we spend time doing this. What are things I can take away from this that's not maybe immediately applicable to me, and yet there are some implications that are useful for our students now and in the future. I've listed a couple of those for you, pretty straightforward, and I'm sure you or the students can probably come up with one or two more reasons why this might be helpful. And then the last 3 questions are pressing into the last part of the chapter, the end of the book. We've got the famous verse about the devil prowling around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Ask them, what do they think what would the devil be looking for in a person to devour? I think there are some obvious things that students could pull just from their own minds, from even just the concept of the image that Peter's painting of a lion stalking their prey. The weak are an obvious choice, but I think in the context, and ask them to dig into the verses and see if they can pull out something maybe that they wouldn't immediately think of. In the context, to me, it seems like Peter is also pretty worried about those who are prideful, the unsuspecting, the people that aren't being watchful. That's kind of what he is commanding them to do. He says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around. And so he's worried about those who, because of their pride, might think that they're above falling, above giving into temptation, above leaving the faith. They're kind of unsuspecting. It's almost like they've fallen asleep on their faith. And so that's another big crew that I think Peter is warning. And I've given you another verse, 1 Corinthians 10:12, to go and read to kind of support that point. And it's a bit of a call to all of us, regardless of how strong our faith is currently, how strong we think it is currently. We need to continue to follow that command to be watchful, be wary, be on alert, be awake, be focused in on our faith, and not be lulled to sleep by the world. Which question 4 kind of builds off of that. What do you think it means to be watchful? What is Peter talking about when he says be watchful? How do we actually carry that out in our lives? And I've given a couple pointers there. I think part of that is living in community that's accountable, that you're accountable to, that will call you out if you're drifting, if you are wandering from the faith, falling asleep. I think personally, we have to spend more time in confession, more time examining our own faith. Sometimes we can just go through the motions and assume we're good, we're fine, we're strong, and that's part of what it means, I think, to be falling asleep and to not be watchful, is to just take our faith for granted, to take our continuance, our perseverance in the faith for granted, which the Bible doesn't seem to encourage us to do. It wants us to be watchful, be attentive over over our faith, even when we feel like we're in a really good spot. And then the last one, how does Peter say that we should resist the devil? So he's prowling around like a roaring lion. He's seeking someone to devour. And then Peter says, resist the devil. And he kind of tells us how we're supposed to do that, which may be surprising to some of us. He says, resist him, firm in your faith. And so I think that's the answer, that the way that we resist the devil is by standing firm in our faith. We might think, we resist the devil by our strong willpower, by gritting our teeth and trying really hard and avoiding temptation and persevering in the midst of temptation. But Peter seems to indicate our main tool in fighting against the schemes of the devil is our faith, which I agree with Peter, that the best way to stand against the devil and his schemes to get us to fall is to believe what the Word says, about sin, that it's a fleeting pleasure that passes, it leads to death, it's dangerous, it's not worth it, and to believe what the Word says about Christ and about following Him, that He's the fountain of living water, that He is all satisfying, that at His right hand there is joy forevermore. And when we believe those things, the lies of the devil, the temptations that he might try to draw us into, fall on deaf ears, and it becomes a lot easier for us to resist. It's when our faith, we doubt those things, doubt what the Word says about sin, doubt what the Word says about God, that we actually end up falling into temptation and into sin. That's kind of, goes all the way back to the garden. Eve had doubts about both of those things, doubts about God's goodness and His promises to her, and also doubts about what God warned about and the consequences and the dangers of sin. And so it really is a battle of faith. It's a battle of belief. Much more so than we might think. It's not just a battle of willpower and determination. So that's what we've got. Pretty straightforward, simple, short questions for you this week. I'll see you guys on Sunday for us to close out this book.